The morning sun cast golden light across the lake as I stood on the weathered dock, inhaling the scent of pine and fresh water. Steam rose from my coffee mug, dancing with the mist hovering over the water surface. This lake cabin had been in my family for 3 generations, passed down from my grandfather who built it with his own hands in 1965. Every plank, every nail, every window held a memory. I had escaped here from the city every chance I got over the past 15 years. The corporate world with its endless meetings and artificial deadlines melted away the moment I turned onto the gravel road leading to the cabin. Here, time moved differently. The rhythm of nature replaced the pulse of urban life. My blood pressure dropped 20 points every time I crossed the threshold of this simple wooden structure. The cabin itself was nothing spectacular by modern standards. 2 bedrooms, a modest kitchen, and a great room with enormous windows facing the lake. The natural wood exterior had weathered to a silvery gray that blended with the surrounding pines. The landscaping was intentionally understated, native plants and natural pathways rather than manicured lawns. My reverie was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. I turned to see a white SUV with Lake Pines Community Association emblazoned on the door. I had heard rumors about the formation of a homeowners association in our previously informal lake community, but had dismissed it as nothing that would affect properties like mine that predated any formal development. A tall woman with immaculately styled blonde hair stepped out, clipboard in hand. She wore white pants that seemed impractical for the natural setting and a blue blazer that looked more appropriate for a corporate boardroom than a lakeside community. "Good morning. I am Karen Mitchell, president of the newly formed Lake Pines HOA. Her smile never reached her eyes as she extended a manicured hand. "I am conducting initial compliance inspections of all properties within our jurisdiction." I reluctantly shook her hand. I was not aware my property fell under any HOA jurisdiction. This cabin has been here since before any formal development existed around the lake. Karen's smile tightened. "Every property within the Lake Pines boundary is now subject to our community standards. The vote passed last month." She gestured to my cabin. "I will need to document several violations I can already see from here." The first official notice arrived 3 days later, an envelope containing photographs of my cabin with circles around problem areas and a list of violations: non-conforming exterior finish, excessive natural vegetation, unapproved dock structure. The initial fine totaled $750 with a 30-day compliance deadline. I attended the next HOA meeting at the wood-paneled community center, documentation in hand proving my property predated any community guidelines. The room fell silent as I presented my case, showing photographs of the cabin from the 1960s. Karen sat at the head of the table, her expression unchanged. "While we appreciate the historical significance of your property, Mr. Anderson, the bylaws are clear. All properties must conform to current standards regardless of when they were built. The community has voted for these standards to protect property values." "But my cabin literally helped establish this community," I argued. "People bought lots here because they loved the natural aesthetic that properties like mine created." Whispers filled the room. I noticed neighbors exchanging glances, some nodding in agreement, others averting their eyes. The community was already dividing. "The matter is settled," Karen declared, bringing down a small gavel. "Noncompliance will result in escalating penalties." Over the next 3 months, the notices multiplied. Each time I addressed one violation, 2 more would appear: paint the exterior. Now the shade was non-approved. Trim back natural vegetation. Now the landscape needed proper mulching and border definition. Fix the dock. Now it required architectural review and approval. The final blow came 6 months after Corinne's first visit. A certified letter arrived declaring my property chronically non-compliant and subject to enhanced enforcement measures. The document outlined potential liens against the property and even foreclosure procedures available to the HOA if violations remained unaddressed. That evening, I stood on my dock watching sunset colors reflect across the lake's surface. Orange and pink ripples stretched toward the horizon as darkness crept in from the east. For the first time since inheriting this piece of paradise, I wondered how much longer it would belong to me. What had begun as an annoyance had transformed into something far more sinister. This was not about community standards. This was personal. The intrusions became more frequent and bold as spring turned to summer. I began documenting everything in a leather-bound journal, originally intended for recording fishing successes and wildlife sightings. Instead, it became evidence of harassment. Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. Corinne and two board members walking property perimeter, taking photographs of north side fence line. Thursday, 2:15 p.m. 4 violation notices for inappropriate storage of watercraft regarding my canoe. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Corinne leading unfamiliar couple along shoreline, pointing at cabin repeatedly. Each interaction with Corinne left me more unsettled than the last. Her eyes contained a calculating coldness that suggested this was more than bureaucratic overreach. She wanted something, and my cabin seemed to be the target. The financial strain grew unbearable. Each weekend became a desperate attempt to address violations before new ones appeared. I spent $3,000 repainting the exterior in an approved shade nearly identical to the original. The next week, a notice arrived citing unapproved renovation work conducted without proper permits. Through my kitchen window one Tuesday afternoon, I spotted Corinne leading a couple in business attire along my waterfront. The man carried what appeared to be property documents. The woman gestured excitedly toward my dock. I grabbed my phone and hurried outside. "Excuse me," I called, approaching the trio. "You are trespassing on private property." Corinne appeared momentarily startled before regaining her composure. "We are conducting a standard HOA inspection within our rights." "With potential buyers," I demanded. "Mr. Anderson, these are community consultants, and according to Section 7.3 of the bylaws, community representatives have authority to access property lines for compliance verification." She produced a document with highlighted text. "My property line extends to the water, you know that." The couple exchanged uncomfortable glances before retreating toward Corinne's SUV. Corinne remained, her eyes narrowing. "Your continued resistance to community standards is being documented, Mr. Anderson. The board is considering more significant measures." That night, I installed the first security cameras, one overlooking the dock, another facing the driveway. The systems uploaded footage to cloud storage I could access remotely. I needed evidence of whatever game Corinne was playing. The social isolation grew more pronounced each week. Neighbors who had once stopped to chat now hurried past with quick nods or averted gazes. At the local market, conversations died when I approached. I had become the community pariah, the troublemaker fighting the system designed to protect everyone's investment. Only Harold Jenkins, an elderly resident whose cabin predated even mine, still spoke to me openly. "Watch yourself with Corinne," he warned over coffee one morning. "She did this before at Lake Evergreen. 3 properties foreclosed within a year of her taking over that HOA. All premium waterfront, all redeveloped into luxury rentals by her brother-in-law's company. My stomach tightened at his words. This was never about compliance. The calendar on my kitchen wall showed July 15 circled in red, an unavoidable 2-week business trip to the East Coast. I had postponed it twice already, risking my job security. There was no delaying further. I packed my suitcase with a growing sense of dread. From my bedroom window, I watched another group following Karen along the shoreline. They pointed at my cabin, nodding enthusiastically at whatever she was saying. One man took measurements of the distance from my deck to the water. Before leaving, I activated all security cameras and added 2 new hidden units inside the cabin, one in the living room, another overlooking the kitchen. I doubted these measures would actually deter Karen, but at least I would have evidence of whatever happened in my absence. As I drove away, watching my cabin shrink in the rearview mirror, I could not shake the feeling that I might return to find my sanctuary irreparably changed. Something drastic needed to happen. I needed a plan that would protect not just my property, but my family legacy. The gravel crunched under my tires as I returned from my business trip, exhausted but anxious to check on my cabin. Even from the driveway, I sensed something was wrong. The curtains were drawn differently than how I had left them. My heart raced as I approached the front door, key in hand. The door swung open too easily. Not just unlocked, the latch had been tampered with. I stood frozen in the doorway, surveying my space with increasing horror. Furniture had been rearranged. The coffee table sat at an odd angle. Couch cushions were misaligned. Someone had been inside, not just looking around, living here. In the kitchen, 2 wine glasses sat in the sink. Crumbs littered the counter. The refrigerator contained unfamiliar food items I had never purchased. My hands shook as I moved through the space that no longer felt like mine. It felt violated, contaminated. The true extent of the invasion became clear in the bedroom. My bed linens had been disturbed, used by strangers. The framed family photograph that always sat on my nightstand was missing. Looking around, I noticed bare patches on the walls where other family photos had been removed, leaving ghostly rectangular outlines on the faded wallpaper. With trembling fingers, I accessed the security camera footage on my laptop. The video revealed the full scope of Karen's audacity. The day after my departure, her white SUV pulled into my driveway. She entered my home using a key I had never given her. Behind her followed 2 men carrying measuring tapes and clipboards. "The square footage is perfect," one said, walking through my living room. "Once we remove these outdated fixtures and open up this wall, the value will double." Karen nodded approvingly. "The HOA will acquire it within 3 months at this rate. The foreclosure process has already begun." The footage continued, showing multiple visits over the 2 weeks. Karen brought different groups through, contractors, designers, even a couple she referred to as premium investors. Most disturbing was footage from 4 days ago, Karen hosting what appeared to be a dinner party on my deck. 6 people drinking wine and eating food prepared in my kitchen, seated in my chairs, planning the future of my property as if I no longer existed. "Once we clear out this eyesore," Karen said, gesturing around my cabin, "we can showcase what Lake Pines living should truly be." My hands were shaking so violently I could barely continue searching through footage. In my desk drawer, I discovered paperwork inadvertently left behind, or perhaps intentionally planted to intimidate me. HOA foreclosure documents with my name and property information. Development plans for Lake Pines premium waterfront villas, with my lot clearly marked for new construction. A strategic plan to accelerate noncompliance foreclosure through enhanced enforcement. I sank to the floor, overwhelmed by violation and rage. This was not simply harassment or power-hungry bureaucracy. This was calculated theft. Karen was orchestrating my financial ruin to seize my property. My family legacy was being erased room by room, memory by memory. That evening, I called an emergency HOA meeting, armed with printed security footage and the documents I had found. 20 neighbors gathered in the community center, expressions ranging from curious to uncomfortable as I plugged my laptop into the projector. Before we begin, Karen stated from her position at the head of the table, I want to remind everyone that unauthorized recordings of board members performing official duties is a violation of HOA policy. Unauthorized entry into a private residence is a crime, I countered, my voice shaking, as is conspiracy to commit property fraud. The room fell silent as images appeared on screen. Karen entering my home, the dinner party on my deck, the foreclosure papers, the development plans with my property highlighted. Karen remained unnervingly calm. The HOA bylaws clearly permit emergency inspections when properties show signs of neglect or abandonment. As president, I have an obligation to protect community interests. I looked around the room, searching for allies, finding few. Even those who appeared disturbed by the evidence quickly averted their eyes when Karen glanced their way. The board voted 4-1 to dismiss my complaints as without merit and potential defamation against board leadership. The next day, I consulted with a local attorney, presenting my evidence. His expression grew grimmer with each document. Unfortunately, the HOA agreement you signed does give them considerable power, he explained. Fighting this will cost more than the property is worth. These bylaws were deliberately written to favor the board. I drove home in silence, knuckles white on the steering wheel. Everything I thought I understood about property rights, about fairness, about community, all of it felt like an illusion that had shattered beyond repair. Something fundamental had broken inside me. If the system would not protect me, I would have to protect myself. I transformed my dining table into a war room. Legal books, printouts of HOA regulations, property maps, and county records covered every inch of the wooden surface. Yellow legal pads filled with notes surrounded my laptop as I searched for any leverage against Karen and her schemes. Night after night, I worked until exhaustion overcame me. Coffee cups accumulated as I researched case law on property rights and HOA limitations. I highlighted passages and marked pages with colorful sticky notes, creating a chaotic but methodical map toward salvation. 3 days into my research, I discovered the first glimmer of hope. The original survey of my property from 1965 showed a discrepancy with the HOA boundary map. According to the county records, the HOA jurisdiction technically ended 3 feet from my cabin's foundation due to an old surveyor's error never corrected in official documents. It was a small technicality, but potentially significant. Further digging revealed more ammunition. Karen Mitchell had served as HOA president in 2 previous communities. Both tenures ended abruptly. Court records in Westlake County showed a settled lawsuit against her previous HOA for abuse of authority and procedural violations in foreclosure proceedings. She had hidden this history from Lake Pines residents during her campaign for presidency. My phone began ringing with calls from other homeowners. Harold Jenkins had spread word of my evidence gathering. 4 other residents reported similar harassment patterns. All owned premium waterfront properties. All had received escalating violations impossible to resolve fully. She targeted the Wilsons last month, explained Martha Green, a retiree from the North Shore. Their property has been in their family since the 1970s. Now they are facing $15,000 in fines for a retaining wall that predates the HOA by decades. We formed a loose alliance, sharing documentation and experiences. Each new conversation revealed more of Corinne's pattern. She was not just harassing me. She was systematically identifying the most valuable legacy properties and finding ways to force them into foreclosure. I needed professional help beyond my own research. Through Harold's recommendation, I contacted Diana Chen, an attorney specializing in HOA disputes. Unlike the previous lawyer, she did not immediately dismiss my chances. "This is not your standard HOA overreach," Diana said, eyes lighting up as she reviewed my growing evidence folder. "This crosses into criminal territory, trespassing, abuse of authority, conspiracy to defraud. The security footage alone gives us leverage most homeowners never have." We developed a multi-layered strategy. First, establish clear documentation of property boundaries using the original survey discrepancy. Second, file formal complaints with county officials regarding unauthorized entry. Third, prepare cease and desist letters regarding harassment. Fourth, document every interaction meticulously. But Diana suggested something more. We need to catch them in the act. Based on the pattern you have described, Corinne will escalate her actions if she believes you are vulnerable. We can use that predictability against her. I spent the next week installing a comprehensive security system. Motion-triggered cameras concealed in trees, doorways, and hidden corners. Tamper-evident seals on every entrance. Timestamped documentation of all property conditions. Each system backed up to cloud storage accessible only through encrypted connections. In my shed, I organized folders containing responses to every HOA violation with documented evidence of maliciously perfect compliance. Each repair, each modification meticulously photographed and dated, creating an irrefutable record that no reasonable violation could stand against. Diana prepared legal paperwork clarifying my property records. We updated boundary surveys, drafted cease and desist letters, and prepared evidence packages ready for submission to authorities. Each document represented another strand in the web I was weaving. "The final element," Diana explained during our strategy session, "is creating the right opportunity. Corinne needs to believe she has the perfect chance to execute her plan while you are away." We crafted false documents suggesting I was considering selling to a developer interested in creating low-income housing units on the lake, the exact scenario that would trigger Corinne's most aggressive response. These papers would be accidentally left where she would find them during her inevitable unauthorized entry. As sunrise broke over the lake on a quiet Sunday morning, I stood on my dock feeling the cool breeze against my face. For the first time in months, a sense of control returned. The property that had been my sanctuary, then my prison, now transformed into something else entirely, a trap for the predator who thought I was easy prey. Phase 1 was complete. All systems were in place, all contingencies planned for. Now came the waiting game, and I knew Corinne would not make me wait long. The performance had to be convincing. On Tuesday morning, I loaded 3 suitcases into my car trunk, making sure to struggle visibly with the largest one. Marjorie Peterson, the neighbor Corinne relied on for information about my comings and goings, was coincidentally watering her flowers as I prepared to leave. "Going somewhere," she called out, trying to sound casual. "Business trip," I replied loudly. "Going to be gone for weeks this time. Important meetings about the future of the property." I noticed her eyes widen slightly at this last detail. The bait was set. As I pulled away, I watched in my rearview mirror as Marjorie immediately reached for her phone. By sundown, Karen would know I was gone and believe the property was unattended. In reality, I drove to a cabin owned by Harold Jenkins on the opposite shore of the lake, where I had established a monitoring station. From there, I could observe my property and access all security feeds while appearing to be miles away. Diana had arranged for trusted associates to maintain regular watch when I needed rest. The security system sent the first alert at 7:42 p.m. that same evening. Karen's white SUV pulled into my driveway, followed by two other vehicles. I watched through hidden cameras as she approached my front door confidently, key in hand. Behind her followed four board members and a man carrying architectural blueprints. Inside my cabin, they moved with the comfort of people who believed themselves unobserved and entitled to the space. Karen directed the group through rooms, speaking animatedly about potential and opportunities. "Once we force the sale," she explained, gesturing expansively through my living room, "we can split the lakefront into two premium lots. Conservative estimate puts the return at triple our investment." One board member, a nervous-looking man named Richard, glanced around uncomfortably. "Are we certain the foreclosure will go through this time? He seems more resistant than the others." Karen dismissed his concern with a wave. "The violation fees alone should break him within a month. The latest round pushes the total over $20,000. No cabin is worth that kind of financial bleeding." The microphones captured every incriminating word, every admission of their true intentions. The trap was working perfectly. Over the next 3 days, contractors arrived to take measurements and mark boundaries. They hammered stakes into the ground that extended well beyond my actual property lines, encroaching nearly 15 feet onto my land in some areas. Karen supervised, directing them to mark trees for removal and identifying sections of shoreline for improvement. On the second day, Karen discovered one of the visible security cameras I had intentionally left in place. Her reaction was explosive. "Who installed this?" she demanded of no one in particular, reaching up to tear the device from its mount. "This is unauthorized modification of community-visible property." She searched the exterior methodically, locating and destroying 3 more cameras, each destruction carefully recorded by hidden backup systems she never found. The footage of her deliberate property damage added another layer to our case against her. On the third day came the moment we had been waiting for. Karen was alone in the cabin, conducting what appeared to be a final inspection before contractors were scheduled to begin initial demolition work. In my desk drawer, exactly where we had placed it, she discovered the folder containing documents about a potential sale to Lakeview Community Housing Development, a fictional company whose description emphasized affordable housing opportunities for working families. The security footage captured her reaction in perfect detail. First confusion, then understanding, followed by unbridled panic. Her carefully maintained facade cracked completely as she realized the potential threat to her plans. She frantically photographed each page with her phone, hands shaking with either rage or fear, perhaps both. Over the next 2 hours, Karen made 17 phone calls from inside my cabin. The hidden microphones captured every conversation. "We need to move immediately," she told someone identified only as Michael in her contacts. "He is planning to sell to a low-income housing developer. Everything we have worked for will be destroyed if that happens." To board members, she presented a different story. "We have an emergency situation requiring immediate action. The Anderson property poses an imminent threat to community values. We need to execute our containment plan now. By evening, she had mobilized a full team. Contractors were scheduled to begin emergency remediation work. The following morning, a euphemism for beginning demolition without permits or authorization. Karen herself drafted new violation notices totaling over $30,000, backdating several to create the appearance of long-standing noncompliance. From Harold's cabin across the lake, Diana and I watched the frantic activity through binoculars and security feeds. Every action, every word, every trespass fed into our evidence servers located miles away. "She has taken the bait completely," Diana observed, reviewing the footage of Karen destroying documentation of proper property boundaries. "Tomorrow morning." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and sadness. "Tomorrow morning. Alert everyone to be ready at 9 a.m. The predator had fully entered the trap, unaware the seemingly helpless prey had become the hunter. Dawn broke clear and crisp over the lake. Through binoculars from Harold's cabin, I watched Karen's operation begin with military precision. At 7:30 a.m., 3 contractor trucks arrived at my property. By 8:00 a.m., workers had unloaded power tools and begun removing sections of my deck railing. Karen arrived at 8:15, clipboard in hand, directing workers with confident gestures. "It is time," Diana said, closing her laptop where she had been reviewing our evidence packages one final time. "Everyone is in position." Our convoy assembled at the Lake Road junction, hidden from view of my cabin. My car led, followed by Diana's sedan, a police cruiser containing Detective Roberts and Officer Chen, and finally the county inspector's truck. We had coordinated this operation meticulously, ensuring all necessary authorities were present to witness and document violations as they occurred. At precisely 9:00 a.m., our vehicles approached my driveway in formation. Through the trees, I could see workers actively dismantling my deck while Karen supervised. The contractors noticed us first, their expressions shifting from confusion to concern. Karen remained focused on her clipboard until the sound of car doors slamming caught her attention. She froze mid-sentence, her practiced authority evaporating as she registered the police cruiser. Her eyes darted from the officers to me, then to Diana with her professional attire and evidence folders. For the first time since this ordeal began, I saw genuine fear in Karen's expression. I walked calmly up my own steps, phone recording in hand. "I believe you are trespassing on private property and conducting unauthorized destruction of private property." Detective Roberts approached Karen directly. "Ma'am, I need to see identification from everyone present and documentation authorizing this construction work." Karen attempted to regain composure. "This is official HOA business. We have authority to conduct emergency remediation on non-compliant properties." "I will need to see that authorization," the detective continued, unmoved, "including permits for structural modification and proof of property owner consent." The county inspector moved toward the partially demolished deck, shaking his head. "There are no permits filed for this address. This is completely unauthorized construction work." Diana stepped forward, methodically presenting our evidence folders. "Detective, we have documented multiple instances of unauthorized entry, destruction of private property, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violations of county building codes." On my laptop, we played selected footage from the security cameras. Karen entering without permission, the planning meetings discussing forcing me out, her destroying surveillance equipment, the conversations about splitting my lot for profit. The contractors began distancing themselves immediately, one man outright stating, "We were told the owner had authorized this work and the permits were being processed. We have nothing to do with whatever is happening here." Most devastating was the reaction of the HOA board members who had arrived midway through our confrontation. Seeing the police and evidence, they immediately turned on Karen. "This was all Karen's idea," Richard stated, his nervous demeanor now fully justified. "She told us the owner had abandoned the property and it was being foreclosed on for community safety reasons." Another board member nodded vigorously. "She handled all the paperwork. We never saw actual documentation about the foreclosure process." Karen's face flushed with anger. "You all approved every action. Do not pretend you were not involved in protecting our community values." The final blow came when a courier arrived, perfectly timed by Diana's planning, delivering records from Karen's previous HOA leadership positions. Documentation of similar schemes against vulnerable homeowners in Lake Evergreen and Pinecrest communities. Newspaper clippings about controversial foreclosures, followed by development projects managed by her brother-in-law's company. The color drained from Corinne's face as she recognized documents she thought long buried. Her eyes darted toward her vehicle, as if calculating the possibility of escape. Detective Roberts stepped closer. "Corinne Mitchell, at this time we are detaining you for questioning regarding multiple potential charges including criminal trespass, destruction of private property, conspiracy to commit property fraud, filing false documents, and operating without required permits." As officers read Corinne her rights, neighbors gathered at a respectful distance, witnessing the collapse of her carefully constructed authority. Some appeared shocked, others vindicated. Martha Green and the other homeowners who had shared their stories stood with Harold Jenkins, faces showing grim satisfaction. I stood on my dock, watching ripples distort and reform on the water's surface from a passing breeze. The community would need to undergo a similar process in the aftermath, disturbed, then gradually finding a new pattern. The damage Corinne had done extended beyond my property to the trust that binds neighbors together. But for the first time in months, I felt the weight lifting. The predator had become the prey. Golden morning light filtered through pine branches as I sat on my fully restored deck, sipping coffee from my favorite mug. 6 months had passed since the day Corinne Mitchell was led away from my property in handcuffs. The front page of the county newspaper lay on the table beside me, headline bold against the white paper. "Former HOA president faces felony charges in property scheme." The investigation had revealed patterns stretching across 3 counties, targeting unique properties, manufacturing violations, forcing sales, then profiting from redevelopment through companies connected to Corinne or her family members. Prosecutors had uncovered 12 similar cases over 5 years. 4 had resulted in successful foreclosures and property transfers before my case broke the pattern. The Lake Pines Community Center now hosted a different atmosphere during meetings. Gone was the authoritarian structure Corinne had established. In its place, collaborative and respectful discussions about minimal, transparent guidelines that protected the lake environment while respecting property rights. Harold Jenkins had been elected interim board chair, his gentle wisdom guiding the healing process. Former board members, now understanding how they had been manipulated, helped establish safeguards against future abuses. Richard, the nervous man who had questioned Corinne during their planning session, became particularly dedicated to creating transparency measures and limitations on HOA enforcement powers. Diana's legal team helped 4 other homeowners recover damages from the disbanded HOA insurance policy. The Wilsons reclaimed their property that had been in foreclosure proceedings, the manufactured violations dismissed by county authorities. Martha Green received compensation for unnecessary modifications Karen had forced upon her historic boathouse. Most surprising was the community reconciliation that followed the scandal. Neighbors who had avoided me during Karen's reign now stopped by with apologies and housewarming gifts. Marjorie Peterson brought homemade bread and tears of genuine remorse for her role as Karen's informant. "I truly believed we were protecting property values," she explained, hands twisted nervously around her breadbasket. "I never knew she was targeting specific homeowners for personal gain." Gradually, my cabin returned to its authentic character. I rehung family photographs in their proper places. The weathered wood exterior remained unpainted despite having approved colors available. The natural landscaping flourished as native plants reclaimed their territory from Karen's mandated ornamentals. Each element that made this place special, that connected it to my family history, was restored and preserved. The impact extended beyond our lakeside community. County commissioners used the case to draft new regulations limiting HOA powers and requiring judicial review of foreclosure actions. The Karen Mitchell Act established homeowner protections that prevented similar schemes throughout the region. On the anniversary of the confrontation, I hosted a lakeside gathering, a celebration of community resilience and justice. Tables of food lined my yard as neighbors mingled freely. Children played along the shoreline while adults shared stories around a bonfire. Harold Jenkins raised his glass in a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "To standing firm when it matters most," he said, voice carrying across the gathering, "and to remembering that true community means protecting each other, not just property values." As twilight settled over the lake and conversation flowed around me, I realized the most important lesson from the ordeal. The true trap was not the cameras or legal documentation I had assembled. The trap was Karen's assumption that one person standing firm against injustice would always be outmatched by systems of power. She never considered that determination, community, and truth could overpower even the most carefully constructed schemes. My grandfather's weathered cabin stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, its imperfect lines and natural character a testament to authenticity prevailing over artificial standards. Sometimes, the lakeside cabin that refuses to be renovated becomes more than just a family legacy. It becomes the foundation for something far more valuable than property values or community aesthetics. It becomes the cornerstone of justice,